from City of Charlotte and the state auditor's investigation. Quick recap here, and this is kind of a long, convoluted story, but we're going to start with the very latest. We just obtained a letter today from the North Carolina office of the state auditor. This was a letter addressed to Charlotte Mayor Vi Lyles, and it is essentially laying out an investigation to come into a potential disbursement of public dollars that were done potentially outside the public view. This was a potential settlement that was given to CMPD Chief Johnny Jennings, ranging between $100,000 to $300,000. And we heard Councilmember Victoria Watlington just a couple weeks ago raise concerns about corruption on this front and the fact of how this settlement was allegedly done. We wanted to bring in some more insight into this matter, and so we have joining us here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus, the Research Director for Taxpayers Protection Alliance. We have David McGarry joining us. So David, thanks so much for your time and thanks for coming on Live Impact News.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we've kind of gotten you up to date on some of the case, and of course, as we chat a little bit more over the next several minutes, we can weave in more of the backstory to this alleged settlement. But what is your first takeaway with a situation like this, knowing that I know that your organization is very attuned to trying to root out waste of taxpayer dollars and try to prevent that from happening? So in just a little bit of a recap that we sent you on the situation, what are your thoughts?
One of the primary virtues of local government is that it allows the people to both participate in the government, but also to have a certain amount of transparency, which in turn enables a certain amount of accountability. And these are very good things. And one of the most concerning elements of this entire episode is the murkiness that surrounds it all. We, as you allude to, we don't precisely know for sure exactly what's going on. And worse, it seems as the council member has stated that sometimes the government officials themselves don't exactly know what's going on, but nonetheless, something seems to have proceeded behind the scenes.
Now, I mean, I know that you all look into matters on your own as well, and you take a keen interest, as we mentioned, in trying to curb waste of taxpayer dollars. What can you say as far as the state auditor? Because I guess I kind of feel like some of the goals are the same, in the sense that in this case, the state auditor says that he believes he is working on behalf of the people of Charlotte. Writing this is a quote, by the way, from the letter that was sent to the mayor. Quote, "Even if the payment," so he's referring to the settlement, potential settlement with the police chief, "was worth 1 penny, it should be disclosed to the public in a timely and transparent manner. There is no tax dollar free from public scrutiny." What are your thoughts on that?
That is entirely right. The first duty of the state auditor is to shed light on this situation so that the taxpayers and the voters can know what's going on and make their own judgments about whether something wrong has occurred. In the best case scenario, this has been entirely harmless, and yet still the taxpayers and the voters would have a right to know. And then in the worst case scenario, this would be a case of a high-ranking city official becoming upset over certain convoluted goings on, and then working within the political system to secure a fairly large six-figure payout.
I want to take folks back through, because we mentioned the storyline here is kind of long, but we wanted to kind of explain some of the backstory that led up to this potential settlement. This stems from a potential back and forth with a former council member, Tarek Bakari, District 6, who, by the way, we just saw a new council member taking over that position today, officially sworn in, as Mr. Bakari has stepped down from that position to pursue a role within the Trump administration. But this was over a dispute, more or less, over the police chief at one point not allowing his officers to wear outer carrier vests. And this got particularly heated after a deadly officer ambush that happened April of last year Mr. Bakari made a resurged push, if you will. This was a push that he had been doing for a while, but this brought it back to the forefront, this extra layer of protection. And essentially some of these text messages sent to the chief, there were allegations that they were threatening in nature, but essentially we did obtain some of the text messages where Mr. Bakari is addressing the chief, but essentially telling him he's going to go to war over this and potentially ruin his legacy. And this is where we see this alleged settlement come from behind closed doors. David, I'm curious, what do you tell folks? What is your messaging to folks when it comes to trying to educate people on knowing what your government is doing and how it is handling things? Because I imagine you probably want folks to be aware and try to stay as knowledgeable as possible.
The simple fact is that politics get messy. Things get heated, emotions rise, and elected officials do not always behave themselves exactly as we wish that they would. However, that doesn't mean that the taxpayers are on the hook for large-scale payouts, and that certainly doesn't mean that taxpayers don't have a right to know exactly what's going on and how public funds are being directed. As I've alluded to, there seems to be multiple levels of dissatisfaction that surround this case. There seem to be multiple levels of the details being shrouded from both elected officials and from the general public. And that's simply no way to run a railroad, much less a government. The voters to whom officials are directly accountable should know exactly where public monies are going. And this applies not only to cases like this that involve settlements, but this also applies to cases of other dispersals of public funds. At the end of the day, tax dollars come from the people. They come from the paychecks that hardworking voters earn, and voters, because of that fact, have a right to know precisely where that money is being directed.
By your experience, with your sample size of the work that you do and perhaps, I guess, the investigations that you do, how common would you say government waste is when you actually start to get wind of a case, let's say, and you start to look into it? How frequently would you say it actually turns out to be a situation where there is money being wasted?
The proverbial waste, fraud, and abuse is incredibly incredibly common at all levels of government. And unfortunately, sometimes at the local level, it becomes even more common because the simple fact is that local officials sometimes think that they're outside of the media spotlight and therefore that they can get away with cutting certain corners that they might not otherwise be able to if they were subjected to the scrutiny of the national media. Now, I don't want to cast any specific aspersions or make any specific claims until we have the full facts of the case, but there's certainly smoke in this case. There's certainly warning signs that something that is not quite on the up and up has occurred. And because of that fact, the state auditor is perfectly perfectly within both his rights, but also he's really bound by duty to get involved here and to ensure that there is some level of accountability and there is a certain level of transparency in a case like this, in which the details, which should be public, are simply not.
Anything that you would like to leave our viewers here with on Live Impact News before we let you go, as far as this case, in general, government spending, what people can do, maybe even to just empower themselves to be better citizens and better watchdogs?
The old phrase goes that knowledge is power. The idea that people should vote for elected representatives and then allow the government to run on autopilot without much scrutiny has a pretty dark and dismal history wherever it's been implemented. So I would encourage your viewers to stay on this case, remain educated, continue putting pressure on public officials to sort this out and reveal exactly what's been going on. The certain I shouldn't quite say scandals yet, but certain problematic instances have oftentimes gone shall we say, they've flown under the radar. As people lose interest, they move on to other stories. Maybe they get distracted by national issues. But government works best where the people are doggedly in pursuit of their elected officials to ensure that everything is done well, everything taxpayer dollars are spent to their best uses, and to ensure that there is the necessary transparency to ensure that people are held accountable and public funds are not being misused.
David McGarry with Taxpayers Protection Alliance, we thank you so much for your time, and come and join us whenever you'd like here on Live Impact News. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And folks at home will remind you, of course, as David so aptly pointed out, of course, an investigation does not necessarily mean wrongdoing. This is simply an investigation by the state auditor into city leadership to see how things were done and if there was any wrongdoing. But the letter sent to Mayor Lyles today indicates that Dave Biolik, the state auditor, will be asking questions such as whether there was a payment, because once again, this is kind of rumor mill in some situations, I guess we'll say. There is going to be a question about how much was reportedly paid, if there was anything paid, where did the money come from specifically, and as well, of course, several other pertinent questions. So we will definitely be keeping you up to date with the very latest on the situation. We'll let people know, too, that our Siobhan Riley has picked up that story for this evening. So if you keep it here on WCNC Plus, we'll have updates for you throughout the evening. She's reaching out to city officials. We've reached out to the mayor. We're reaching out to council members to see if there's comment on this. We've reached out to the state auditor's office. And we're trying to dig on this and get the very latest for you, all of the information, because we too are watchdogs and we want to make sure that you are informed and everything is on the up and up when it comes to our government officials. So stay tuned throughout Live Impact News, as well as our 11 o'clock news right here on WCNC Plus.